Samantha. All right. All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, my panelists, for being on this panel. I think I'm Shobhit Patnaik, partner with Avasant. I lead the business transformation practice here at Avasant and been with Avasant for a really long time. Before we get into the detail of discussions, and I want to really welcome all of you, with starting with Nora, CEO of Nirvana. We have Rich Cabre from WNS, Vice President North America. We have Patty Sedano, SVP, Global Financial Services at Sony Music. And we have last but not the least, Ganesh Kumar, Senior Executive Vice President, OFG Bancorp. Thank you, panelists, for coming here. Just to set a little bit of context around the topic that we have here on digital operating models and how they're driving agility. I actually was watching this Netflix series a few weeks back, and again, picking up from what we were discussing, Patty, a little bit earlier on aliens. This was an alien race that was trying to invade Earth. They had about 300 years to get to Earth, and they started disrupting all the scientific discoveries. Not that they were afraid of the technology that the human race had, but it was more around the pace at which the human race was building technology. And by the time they would have gotten to Earth, the Earthlings would have been a lot more advanced than they are at that point in time. So what is that telling me is that it's the pace of change that we are living through today is phenomenal. It's disrupting value streams. It's disrupting operating models quite a lot. What I've realized looking at this change is it's not just about putting in technology in an operating model and calling it digital operating model. It's about changing the way we do work, the way we engage with our customers, the way we drive value, the way we empower our employees and encourage them for innovation. Driving a culture of innovation is also something that's critical to this. So what we will discuss in this panel a little bit is your journey in terms of how you've been able to transform the organizations that you've been working with, and also some of the challenges that you've faced. Operating models have not been static. Actually, they've been transforming over the past many years. They started off with siloed operating models, which were around business units, and then they transformed into more functional operating models where you started integrating some of the functions and driving more efficiency. And then it moved into a digital operating model where you threw in a little bit of technology and started integrating more from a functional and business process level. And finally, now we're getting into next-gen digital operating models where it's more about the customer journey and how you integrate leadership, operations, and technology together to drive that specific value. With that, let's get into the discussion, and my first question here would be to Nora. Nora, if you can just give a little bit of a background about yourself, and as you do that, also talk a little bit about how organizations have been adopting digital operating models and what are they doing right, and are they really there yet? So just give us a little bit of your perspective.
Sure, thank you. Can everybody hear me? Okay, so Nora Osman, I'm the CEO of Nirvana. I know on the board it says previous AVP of Service Management at Montefiore. And I will say that my journey has always been around helping organizations with their customer experience journey. And my background has been in different verticals, including healthcare, which is where I came from in the last 10 years. Before that, financial services and insurance and software development, and even hospitality. So what is common across all industries is there's always a customer, and we're always trying to service or provide a product to that customer. That hasn't changed, and it's not going to change regardless of what era we're in. And so reimagining the world that we are going to live in from the lens of how do we exceed the customer expectations and customizing it to where each individual, the platinum role, is being treated in the way they want to be treated, not just how traditionally we thought they needed to be treated, is really very powerful objective. So when we talk about this whole model that needs to be produced, I think about this business model as the human body. Let's think about this for a second. Technology is kind of like the bloodstream, and it's really meant to deliver the blood or the components needed, the resources for each of the organs to function. And of course, you've got the brain, you've got the arms, you've got the legs. All of them need the nutrients in the bloodstream and in the body to operate. So it's really around developing processes that allow for that free flow of resources to where you need it. If you're about to sprint, you need that blood going straight to your legs. If you are typing, you need it going to your hands, right? You need your eyesight to always be on when your eyes are open. So it's really about anticipating how to shift information in a very agile way to the areas that need it so that we're firing on all cylinders.
Great answer. And do you think organizations have actually been able to achieve a digital operating model, or they're still somewhere in the middle, very siloed? What has been your experience so far? Yeah.
I think it's an objective that everybody has. There are varying degrees of success with that objective, and I do find that the more visionary C-suite level organizations are the ones who actually optimize that journey, and they focus on the proper marriage between the people, which should always come first, then the processes and the technology. Because in my opinion and a lot of others, technology is an enabler. Right? It is there, again, like the bloodline for the body, to move information and data and facilitate the better, the faster, and cheaper objectives of what we're doing in services and product development.
Great, thanks a lot, Nora. Ganesh, I'll move on to you for my next question. If you can briefly introduce yourself, and just to give everybody a little bit more context, OFG Bancorp has been able to successfully navigate some of the more complex and heavily regulated industries that you work in, and it's a very competitive market space as well. From what I've heard and our previous discussions, I think you've been able to transform your operating model to become a lot more agile and support the changing customer needs. Can you give us a little bit of background and your journey on this transformation as well?
Sure, thank you. And OFG Bancorp is a $15 billion assets under management, and it also has an equal size wealth management firm. And we have multiple units like insurance and things like that. One of the things that we always looked at from an operating model perspective is how can we constantly evolve so that we can bring the services that bank or the insurance company or the broker dealer provides to our customers, right? Because we operate in a very competitive environment, technology is the way to go for us. So the bank was always under the mandate of using technology and exploiting technology to always reinvent ourselves. With the recent emphasis on whatever developments that has happened in the technology, the pace of innovation, things like that, we realized that we were always good in executing projects. But how do we take that core skill that the organization has, which would do advancements in discrete phases, right? Mm-hmm. You do a project and then business would take care of it. But how do we take that and make it continuous so that the innovation would happen automatically as part of the normal operation? So that is a big change in the operating model that we were pursuing. That was partly necessitated by the competition, basically. So we believe in exploiting technology to advance the business, right? So, but at the end of the day, there's a common goal. You know, we only follow two metrics at the top, which is our growth rate in terms of assets, and then the return on assets, right? Okay, from a financial perspective, we might have various OKRs and KPIs and things like that, but if you really look at it, I think our vehicle to achieve that is constant innovation, right? So that's driven right from the top for us to go after those things. And therefore, all the parts of the organizations which are typically operating in one way, they had to reinvent another way. Yeah. Even up to the finance, because we used to justify projects based on ROIs. Yeah. In a constant innovation where there is more mistakes to be made, more learning to be gotten, sometimes this doesn't work. right? So it's not only just retooling the technology organization or the business or the customer-facing organization. We have to take every single part of the organizations to make that happen.
Essentially, you're saying it's you don't treat them as projects which are specific end date. You're making it a continuous improvement cycle rather than this is the start date and end date of a project.
Correct.
Got it. All right. That's great. So staying on the same thread, Patty, just wanted to get your perspective, and please introduce yourself as well. Was to understand how customer journeys, especially because you are part of the finance organization and a lot of the digital transformation and operating model design that's happening is focused a lot around the customer journey. How do you integrate the finance function, which is typically outside or is perceived to be outside this whole cycle? How do you build that into the operating model and ensure that it's driving the right value?
Yeah, I think kind of going back to what you were saying, I think the lines between those silos have broken down quite a bit. And I think the most successful organizations are no longer thinking CFO in this box, CEO in this box, we're tearing down those walls. I think from a finance organization point of view and as a nerdy accountant, we think about those things like ROI, and we think, we're going to embark in something, we need to have a return. We have to stop thinking that way. I think one of the biggest problems that companies have is that people in finance organizations actually slow down the process because we are looking too much at getting those returns, and that's actually hindering us being at the front of the game. I think in our organization, as you guys know, the music industry was extremely affected by change in technology and piracy, and we had some very dark days. And when we evolved at the end of that, in our company, our CFO and our COO made a investment in technology, and selfishly so from a financial perspective, because we have in our world, we have an obligation to an artist at the back end of our process. So it's not just, do whatever you need for your purposes, you've got to make sure you have proper accountability. And so we made some very large investments at a certain moment in time, which have enabled us to really be at the forefront of how our customers, which our customers are a little different. We've got two customers. We've got our listeners of our music, but then we've got our artists, which are also customers. And so our ability to report to them in real time and have them have good data, but that we're providing, that was only made possible because of the investments we made without thinking about the return on investment, thinking more about where is this industry going and how do we get there. And so I think that as we look at our organizations, we have to think to ourselves, are we hindering our potential for the future because we're worried about $5 today? I always say, are you penny wise or dollar wise, penny wise? So I'm saying it backwards. But are you focusing on the wrong things at the wrong time? Good. So I think that's really, really important from a finance organization standpoint.
Great. Thanks. Rich, from your perspective, what are the critical factors that enable successful transitioning into a new operating model? And what are some of the pitfalls? I know you've helped organizations as part of WNS achieve some of this transformation. What do you see being the critical factors of success here, and how do you eliminate some of the risks as well?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, one of the key things is always bear the strategy and the desired outcomes in mind. There's lots of shiny objects that can distract and confuse along the way, but if whatever tool you're leveraging doesn't quickly get you closer to your end goal, that has to be pruned away because nobody has the time. I got my start in consulting back when the most advanced technology was an HP 12C calculator. 2 years later, we got a personal computer, which blew everybody's mind. And now we've got Gen AI. So technology tools will keep evolving, but focus on the strategy, focus on the desired outcomes, focus on the end customers.
Great. So shifting gears a little bit, Nora, what we've seen is transitioning is not easy, right? When you transition into a new operating model or change the ways of working, it's not easy. I think while technology is a key driver for all of this change, there's a crucial component of change management that's often not given enough importance to. What do you see organization typically do, or perhaps not do enough of, to ensure a successful transition into new operating models?
So that's a great question, and I think change is the only constant, right? And the most valuable commodity is our time. So the most successful organizations, in my opinion, focus on the communication aspect and making sure that they start with why. Why are we doing this? And everybody has to understand the purpose and be part of the mission. Because when everybody's in and they feel it and they embrace it, and they've gotten the message, they've absorbed it, they come with a level of creativity and they approach it from their position of strength. And everybody really has some level of contribution towards the overall success of the organization. But when you strain communication, you create fear. You create psychological non-safety, right? You create a culture of trepidation, and there isn't opportunity for real growth and innovation in that type of culture. So then you're fighting an uphill battle when you have all of those missing elements, right? So in my opinion, I think it's so critical that communication is flowing and that you've got people able to ask questions and bring real concerns and raise their hand and flag opportunities, right? Because they're going to be part of that flow of information and the innovation. But it starts with communication, and I think that's what affects the culture in a very direct way. Without that, I don't think you could really be successful.
So do you see this more top-down or bottoms-up, or do you see it should be a combination of both to ensure change is lasting?
So I go back to a definition of culture that I heard a long time ago, and it's the behavior that senior leadership either display or tolerate. So if you've got leaders that are very open and engaging and they want to share and they're modeling that or they're encouraging, then you're going to see that. It always starts from the top, and it can be very easily squashed if you don't have support.
Great, thanks. Ganesh, you know a lot about risk being in the banking sector, and a lot of this transformation is not without risk, right? There is a lot of risk in transforming your operating model. So how do you balance out risk with innovation? What has been your approach there?
Well, I'm not going to talk about the risks that everybody has talked about, like external factors, right? So one of the things in the innovation is when you say innovation without any boundaries or scope, that is, without a rallying cry, focus areas, whatever you call them, innovation could be wasteful. Because you basically have to experiment a lot. People say fail a lot. Well, in our organization, we don't have that much tolerance for failure a lot. Therefore, what we did was we basically said, okay, we know that we have to differentiate ourselves. This is our operating model. What are the 3 platforms? I think the word has been bandied around, whether it's platform or product. You become product centric, right? So we don't want to say that, because product centric has a very legacy sort of connotation for us. So we call it a platform. So so we fixed that we need to excel in the way we reach to new customers, and we need to excel in the way we deliver our services. We need to excel in the way we make the money movement more convenient for customers, right? And faster and cheaper and options. So we basically fixed these 3 platforms. I think all of the business units had to work on those 3 platforms, and each one of the business units have a self-contained cross-functional team. So we don't have, in those teams, yes, they come from a hierarchical organization, but the hierarchy in our organization is purely for administrative purposes, expense reimbursement, performance, those kind of stuff, reviews and all kind of stuff, but not necessarily for functional. In fact, we went to the extreme of moving people from 2 or 3 buildings to put them in like clusters. We don't want to call them pods, but that's related to a technology. That kind of fostered a whole lot of communication that would not happen across the sort of organizational units. Like the technical person can immediately be there, accessed, can provide the input, or the business person would say this would work, this would not work. So I think we rejiggered the organization itself into a more of a less of a hierarchical removing the silos of the organization, right? So that's one example of how we kind of kindle the innovation, right? And when you talk about the risk, I think I don't want to talk about the external risk I said, but the internal risk, which is what I alluded to. Most organizations want to change and advance with technology, but they don't think about what needs to happen in rest of the organizations too. HR needs to change. Our performance appraisal will have to be retinkered, because right now we're working in this cluster, your administrative manager don't know what you're doing, right? So there's no point in going. And the way we deliver our feedback and all those kind of things, the talent management, all of those things need to change. So biggest risk is, for me, if you just think about this as an innovation, as a separate program, and don't think about the traditional parts of the organization, and you think that would be okay to leave it like that without touching and transforming them, I think that's the biggest mistake that you can make in the organization. So.
Got it. And do you think the size of the organization also matters, because you've been able to transform faster than others because you are probably smaller than some of the bigger monolithic banks and banking industry that we see? Is that a critical factor, or do you think transformation can be achieved in organizations irrespective of their size?
I think even in a large organization, what we did was we made the team smaller, but cross-functional, and let those clusters work on itself on some specific things, and then come together. Obviously, it needs to be coordinated at the higher level, because you want the organization to move in one direction, right? So I think this is where you asked Nora whether it's a top down or bottom up. The answer is both. And I know it's a cop-out answer, but at least for us, it was very clear right from the beginning. This is what the digital transformation in the organization needs to be, and we don't mean that as a technology transformation, but an organizational transformation and a business transformation, right? So we know that that's the path that we need to go. That's the true north, right? And then different clusters work towards this, and then we have quarterly business reviews and things like that, which would happen with different clusters, so that we make the alignment possible.
Great, thanks. Patty, again, you touched upon the topic of customers. You have two sets of customers, and you have artists, you have the end listeners of music as well, and their journey maps are different a little bit, and you are somewhere in the middle, right? So just wanted to understand a little bit in terms of your transformation journey, because you've done a lot of transformation, you've used partners as well in that journey. So just wanted to understand how you were able to pioneer innovation in your organization, and how did that help drive value across the organization?
Yeah, I mean, I think in our company, we've done some things well, we've some things not so well. Or let me rephrase that. It's not maybe that we haven't done them well, it's just where we are in the transformation maybe is still a little bit immature. And what I mean by that is, I think that there's been some finance transformations that we've done that have been a reaction to the reality of kind of where the business is going. When I started with the company, we had 52 individual business units that all worked individually. We had like 20 different ERPs, 15 royalty systems. We're at a very different point 15 years later. But I think that when we look at where we need to go as an organization, and the role that finance needs to play, in my opinion, in the leadership of some of the other transformations, I think sometimes your day-to-day reality, dealing with those customers on the day-to-day, that becomes a priority. And you're not looking forward as to what do you need to change today to ultimately be the right partner for those customers in 10 years and 20 years, wherever that may be. And so if we don't want to be left behind in this game, we need to be thinking that way. And I think from a finance organization, we've done a lot in the last 5 years in changing the way we function, changing the way our organization runs, and we need to look beyond that. And I think a finance organization, if you're partnering with them well, they can be key partners in that, because most of the time your finance organization is also the one that's most in tune with your data and your numbers. And ultimately, a lot of the decisions that we're going to be making in the future are more data driven than they were in the past. Less gut, more data. And how you use that data and how you understand that data is really important. Sometimes the marketing people, I call them data drunk, we give them a lot of information, but then they're just like drunk. They just don't know what to do with it. And so it's how do we help them to make use of that data, make use of that information, and also help them to think differently in how we're going to move forward as an organization. If you're a creative guy who's sitting in a studio all the time, you're still part of that transformation. But what does that mean for you, and how do we help you become a player in that transformation? So I think that in our organization, a lot of the transformation has been more from the finance, the sales, the IT side, but I think as we continue to move forward, it's more about what are those other areas of the business that need to also continue to transform.
Great, great. Rich, so I mean, we've tried to not talk a lot about Gen AI in this conversation so far, but I think we will need to touch upon that topic a little bit. So just wanted to understand from your perspective how automation, intelligent automation, and analytics are being harnessed today to drive some of this transformation. How do you do that, and how do you help organizations achieve transformation through transforming the technology environment as well?
Absolutely. Yeah, and part of it is starting with what is the right technology solution for the goal at hand. So sometimes RPA is just right for it, and it's got quick payoff, quick interaction. Other times, there are things that Gen AI can do in healthcare, things that it can do in insurance, things that it does with retail, as we've seen. For our clients, that's beyond what they could conceive of originally. The key is working with strong, smart clients like Patty, and really mapping out that journey and bringing the tool to bear that will quickly make an impact. Because for us, if it doesn't pay off in a year, forget it, because the pace of change is so far beyond. You're building my Gen AI strategy and you'll take 18 months to do that. You're building it on something that's obsolete by the time you get to the end. So it has to be quick, it has to be practical, but it has to fit the organization, because change is not easy. And despite all the dazzling technology, if you're not bringing the organization along, if they're not leveraging the power that you're giving them, then everybody's frustrated, and you've frankly been wasting your time.
And if I could add one thing to that, sometimes it's okay to say the solution is not technology right now.
Absolutely.
Sometimes that's okay. And, you know, we work with WNS, and you know, some people are like, oh, well, why do you need that many, you know, humans doing something? And I said, well, because that's not our biggest problem right now. That's solved. This is the biggest problem. This is what we need to focus on. And I think sometimes we get a little distracted by that.
Yep.
We want to make everything about technology, which definitely need to focus on it, but sometimes pick your battles, choose the right thing to focus on. And in our current relationship with WNS, we still have a lot of humans doing a lot of human things, and that's okay. That's a good place to be right now in our transformation path.
Yep, and across, we've got 95 Gen AI use cases in various industries across the firm. There's always a human in the loop in each and every one of them, and I think that'll be the way it will be for a while.
Great. I think this has been a great conversation so far. So one final question to all of you, and please feel free to pick or choose who wants to go first. Change is rapid, right? We've never been in such high-paced change ever in human history. How do you see operating models transform in the future? What's the next big thing not from a technology perspective, but from a transforming the operating model and how you work perspective? What are your thoughts on that area?
I'll give you my opinion. I think we keep hearing this theme in all the other panels. It's around automating the mundane and elevating the humane, right? Because nobody wants to work on boring, difficult, painful activities. And if we can unshackle people from that routine activity, the sky is the limit. So we have it upon us to leverage AI for that purpose. And I think that it's around putting the customer in the middle of everything, and the human element in the middle of everything, and everything else, whether it's process or technology, will support that.
I think from my point of view, I think I totally agree with what you just said. I think the one thing that all of us need to be looking at is the pace in which we do change. And sometimes it's okay to slow down in order to be more successful.
Yeah.
And sometimes if you don't have a good, even though it's okay to make mistakes and it's okay to go down the wrong path or the path you're not sure about, I do think sometimes it's good to take a step back before you take a step forward, just to make sure that that transformation journey and that change, you want to be agile, but you want to be smart in how you do it. And the last thing is, while we have a lot of AI, and I call them the aliens, and a lot of aliens out there, smart people ultimately have to drive where we go, and keeping those smart people engaged but not burnt out is a really important part of looking ahead in your organization. And I think in my world right now, that's something that we're very conscious of right now, that we're looking at a lot.
Great.
Yeah.
Rich, yeah.
One thing I think after decades of promise, I think the biggest coming change in operating models will be personalization. Because the tools we have now allow that rapid adaptation to your individual needs and situation, be it a stakeholder in the company, be it an external client. So I think that's finally here. And for those who are a little older than 12, you've heard mass personalization and personalization for decades. I think we're approaching that finally.
Yeah. Ganesh, your thoughts?
Last thought.
Well, thank you. Put me on the spot. I agree with Nora. I think going back to, the way we kind of look at this is we take a look at the people and see how much of time, even customer facing, right? What we call as the value added interactions and non-value added interactions. And if you really look at it, we do track that one in the job, every job content. The amount of value, non-value added transactions you can reduce using technology. That's what our use case is for
Correct.
anything. Whether it be RPA or ML or Gen AI or whatever it is, and that's what we are applying this one.
Great. I think this has been a very, very thought-provoking conversation. Thank you so much for being on this panel, and thank you so much for listening. We hope you enjoy the rest of the event as well.
Thank you for having
you.
us.
Thank you.
Thank
Great
you.
panel.